Arcadian Vanguard presents the Wrestling News in your daily wrestling newscast for Wednesday, May 1st, 2024. Good morning, I'm Mike Sempervive. We begin today with a story on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Johnson was the subject yesterday of an article on The Wrap which accused him of chronic unprofessionalism in both his film and WWE careers. According to the article, Johnson has repeatedly shown up many hours late to film shoots, costing production companies millions of dollars in the process. One particular example was given of his newest film, Red One, co-starring Chris Evans, in which Johnson's repeated lateness reportedly caused the film to go $50 million over budget. His 2021 film, Red Notice, was also cited, along with an account of Johnson getting into a heated argument with co-star Ryan Reynolds over his tardiness to set. On the wrestling front, the article also claims that Johnson was 3 hours late to Lincoln Financial Field for Night 1 of WrestleMania, in which he was to team with Roman Reigns against Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins in the main event. In response to the article, WWE Executive Vice President of Talent Relations and Head of Communications Chris Legentil stated, quote, "Dwayne was not only on time for WrestleMania, he was hours early to help with rehearsal, and a pleasure to work with throughout the entire run," end quote. Prior to WrestleMania itself, Johnson was significantly late to his scheduled appearance as part of WWE World during WrestleMania week. The Spring Break-in edition of NXT Week 2 was broadcast live last night on USA Network from the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. In the main event, Lola Vice defeated Natalya by referee stoppage in the first NXT Underground Women's match. In the opening match, Oba Femi retained the North American title with a win over Ivar.
How the hell's he back up, Booker?
Big, this young man is looking to step on some toes, and step on some toes, and keep on walking, Jack.
Pop up, powerbomb. Oba Femi has no regard for human life.
After the match, Femi was confronted by former champion Wes Lee. NXT GM Ava Raine announced the establishment of a North American Women's Championship, revealing that the 12 participants to vie for the new title would be announced next week. 6 of the 12 are set to be included in a ladder match at Battleground to determine the first title holder. The segment concluded with a locker room clearing brawl amongst NXT's female wrestlers. In other results, Axiom and Nathan Frazier retained the NXT Tag Team title against the Authors of Pain. Ridge Holland pinned Shawn Spears, Thea Hale beat Jayce Jane by submission, and the Good Brothers defeated Tyreek Igwe and Tyson DuPont. In WWE Draft news, additional draft picks were announced on social media after Raw went off the air on Monday night. They are as follows. Drafted to Raw were Caden Carter and Katana Chance, Natalya, the Creed Brothers, Ivy Nile, and Newcastle Republic, as well as Odyssey Jones and Dijak being called up from NXT. Jones had already been off NXT and wrestling sporadically on WWE house shows since last summer, but had yet to be used on TV. Dijak was previously known as T-Bar on the Raw roster, but had been back in NXT since the end of 2022. Drafted to SmackDown were Apollo Crews, Giovanni Vinci, and Tegan Knox. In ratings news, the draft edition of Monday Night Raw drew an audience of 1.683 million to USA Network, according to Pro Wrestling Torch. That's up from last week's audience of 1.597 million. The rating in the 18 to 49-year-old demographic was a .55, also up from last week's rating of .52. AEW Collision on Saturday drew an audience of 621,000 to TNT, way up from the previous week's audience of 461,000 according to WrestleNomics. The 18 to 49 demo rating was a .21, also significantly higher than the previous week's .13 rating. The show immediately followed the lead-in of an NBA playoff game between the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat. Rampage, which aired immediately after Collision and outside its normal time slot, lost more than half of the Collision audience, drawing a viewership of 293,000 with a demo rating of .09. In news from Japan, New Japan Pro Wrestling has issued an apology after losing a USB drive containing personal information for over 30,000 members of its official fan club. The loss of the drive occurred during the April 22nd New Japan show at Korakuen Hall in Tokyo. The drive contained information such as names, dates of birth, ages, genders, as well as membership information. Credit card information, email addresses, and phone numbers were not contained on the drive, and as of this report, There has been no known illegal use of the information or damage incurred by fan club members. A police report was filed on April 25th. The company has stated it will consider using a safer method to store member information going forward, which would not require the use of USB memory. And in news from outside the ring, Who Killed WCW, the new docuseries being produced by Dwayne Johnson's $7 Productions, now has an official premiere date, which will be June 4th on Vice TV according to Deadline. Said Johnson about the series, which was first announced last November, quote, "The iconic rise and fall of WCW is one of professional wrestling's most captivating stories, full of big dreams, massive successes, painful failures, and the harsh realities of the pro wrestling business. With wrestling viewership and fan engagement at an ultimate high, there has never been a more perfect time to tell top-quality wrestling stories, and there's no better one to start with than a one-of-a-kind behind-the-scenes look at this epic saga," end quote. $7 Productions was also responsible for the Tales from the Territory series on Vice. And before we leave you today, we'd like to remind you that however you consume your content, you can find the wrestling news 24 hours a day and 7 days a week across social media. On Twitter, follow us at Wrestling News AV. Our Facebook page is also Wrestling News AV. The Wrestling News can also be found on the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube page. And for those who utilize Amazon Echo devices, just tell Alexa to play the Wrestling News podcast. And remember to make sure you add podcast at the end. Once again, for daily updates, breaking news, and more, follow the Wrestling News across social media. And that's the news for today. If anything happens, we will be here to tell you about it. No clickbait, no paywall, just the Wrestling News. The Wrestling News is a division of Arcadian Vanguard, and the Wrestling Newscast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network.